Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's BPA Energy Efficiency webinar. I am going to go ahead and get things started by introducing our speakers. I have Elena Kazarov, and Elena is a long-term energy efficiency planner here at BPA. And we have Eric Mullendor, and Eric is the acting manager of the Energy Efficiency Programs. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you, Elena.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar names on the line, if not all of your faces. Okay, so I'll be talking to you about the draft Energy Efficiency Action Plan today. We've been hard at work for the past year putting this together, doing the work that's required to put together our sector strategies, our goals, our savings forecasts, and I'm excited to share some of the work with you. We'll be going over the process of creating the action plan, so the objectives and guiding principles that went into the work, some of the energy landscape that influenced the plan and our thinking around it. We'll talk about the goal and the budget and the forecasted savings, as well as some of the sector strategies qualitatively, and we'll touch on DR and some of the next steps. At some point, I'll hand it over to Eric Mullendor, who I'm sure many of you know, but I'll be starting us off. So what were the objectives for the action plan? There were numerous things we thought about, but these are the three main objectives. So first, we need to acquire savings that provide the greatest power resource benefits. And one way we measure that is by aligning with the 2022 resource program. The resource program is BPA's own look at its needs and generation capabilities, and we look to see what the resource program selected. Many of you have heard us talk about the resource program, and you know that it's not one answer, it's many. So the resource program actually spits out 40 different portfolios from lowest cost to lowest risk. And when I talk about alignment with the resource program, I mean the first portfolio, which is the least cost portfolio. We also knew that we needed to meet BPA's share of the goals established in the 2021 Power Plan and prioritize cost-effective measures. And third, offer a portfolio that all of our customers can implement and specifically support our small, rural, and residential utilities in this endeavor. So offering a portfolio that BPA customers can implement means that you have something comprehensive, holistic, which, the vast majority of your customers can reference, something that's right-sized to your utility and your service territory. So what were the guiding principles? We have the objectives, but what actually guided us in creating the plan? So one, meeting BPA's resource needs and power plan obligations, consulting the selections of the resource program and the power plan. And in some cases, we were trying to meet the exact numbers. In some cases, we were looking for more directional guidance. So one way that we, for example, kind of aligned with resource program needs was putting a lot of emphasis on residential HVAC and water heating measures. These aligned well with the needs that BPA's system exhibited. Their load shapes aligned well with BPA's needs. We also knew that meeting customer needs was a guiding principle. So here again, our intent is to provide customers with an equitable portfolio, minimizing delivery and reporting complexity, and maximizing uptake. So this is another area where residential HVAC, for example, was really important, and we didn't want to de-emphasize it despite maybe, it not being uniformly cost-effective. And lastly, consider value beyond energy savings. So energy efficiency is not just conservation savings. It delivers a lot of value beyond that. Economic, environmental, resiliency benefits. It helps to reduce customers' energy burden. It increases resiliency in the face of extreme weather, which is increasing in magnitude and likelihood, and provides other non-energy benefits like better health, greater safety, and increased comfort. And of course, we all know we've got a lot of legislation, both that has already passed and kind of on the horizon, and we want to align with those goals as best as possible. So The energy landscape is, of course, very complicated, and we didn't intend to comprehensively capture every single factor that that is out there. But these are just a few of the influences that we were mindful of as we were creating the action plan. So we have continuing global events and market challenges. The pandemic is still, very much having an effect on the energy efficiency landscape. Namely, there's a lot of pent-up demand. Costs have gone up. There are supply chain challenges. A lot of you know this better than I do because you're seeing it play out in your service territories. We have cost-effectiveness constraints with a lower amount of cost-effective energy efficiency being available. And that is coupled with a true decline in energy efficiency potential. We see this very much in the residential and commercial and industrial lighting markets, for example. So we're having to get creative with how we incentivize and offer and attract customers to those measures. We have changing resource needs. So the BPA 2022 resource program was very similar to past resource programs, but it did select DR for the first time, which is new. Of course, we all know we have a very evolving power system. Some of the, by no means an exhaustive list, but some of the impacts that we have are electrification, growing peak electric demand as a result, early retirements of coal plants, a greater investment in renewables, a stronger emphasis on resource adequacy, which is another lens, another way of viewing things completely, well, not completely, but, pretty different than traditional, looking at how just to meet resource needs with, the best available, most affordable resource. And we have some interest in demand response that's growing to reduce future capacity constraints. I think we've all heard about some pretty major legislation that has passed in the past year. So it remains to be determined how will IRA and Bill, how will these acts influence utility programs? Will they complement, support, or shift them? This remains to be determined. We've seen from some past history that typically the largest pool of money kind of sets the program requirements and incentive levels. So we're just going to stay mindful of that and continue to monitor these laws and bills as they progress. And lastly, we have the provider of choice process, which has the potential to influence many facets of BPA's relationships with its power customers, including the means by which energy conservation is acquired. So this is that process where we're looking to post-2028 contract negotiations, looking to set a new period of contracts with customers, and it's a highly interactive period. We're having many conversations throughout the year, and of course, energy efficiency plays a role here. This is a very high-level view of what the action plan development process looked like. So inputs are the resource program, the 2021 power plan, utility customer input. I spoke to many, if not all of you, about your thoughts on the action plan, your goals, your needs, something you'd like to see more of, what you want to see less of. We did that through the USB as well as some one-off kind of curated groups of customers to ensure that we represented the region. We also looked at what our current BPA programs are, how they're behaving, and where the successes and failures are, and kind of what the relationship with the market is. So it's a different world, and these interactions are very complicated, and there's a lot of cause and effect, and we kind of look to see, what do we think is going to happen going forward. Of course, we had our program budgets. These are set through the Integrated Program Review, or IPR process, which sets budget for 2-year rate periods. And as I mentioned previously, we looked at equity and the other values of energy efficiency, so kind of the externalities, the non-energy benefits, these important things that aren't necessarily captured in the savings. With those inputs, we went through a process of setting new program and sector strategies and kind of looking at the holistic portfolio and what it looked like. Where are some of the gaps? Is it something that we can offer? Is it something that meets customer needs holistically? We drafted the action plan, that's where we are now, and we put it out for public comment. So we posted the plan last Friday. It's up on the BPA energy efficiency website. There's a subsection for the action plan. And this went out through the announcements through the energy efficiency representatives And I'll touch on this a little bit, but just know that I will talk a little bit about how you can submit comments and where to go, and we'll make sure that there's no snafus there. But I really welcome your comments. You can send them to your account executive, to your EAR, or to your, you can, whoever is your point of contact at BPA, I will be happy to receive them. After we assimilate all of those public comments, we'll review them, we'll see what needs a modification and a response, and we'll produce a final action plan. And the timeline for that is end of April, barring no other kind of major factors that come up through the public comment period. Okay, I'll let that sit for a second. I've talked a little bit about the values that went into the plan, our objectives, our goals, and the development process. Now I'll take you into some of the numbers. So our goal for this action plan is 300 average megawatts across 2022 and 2027. You may be wondering why that time frame is selected, and I'll just remind you that corresponds with the power plan's shorter time horizon. So we kind of create the action plan in response to the power plan's target for BPA. This goal of 300 is a goal that we believe we can achieve. We're already forecasting that we will achieve it. And crucially, it allows us the ability to adaptively manage our portfolio, to address changing conditions, and allow us to implement some corrective actions if we need to. I think you all know kind of what some of those corrective actions will be, but I'll just sprinkle some examples in. We can refine the portfolio through increasing incentives, redirecting programs and program infrastructure to pursue highest savings for least investment. So we can kind of, we can add measures, remove measures. You see that happening in the IM revisions. So that's kind of what we have under our belt. I also just want to point out that I think a lot of you are aware that we typically publish an action plan update halfway through this 2022 through 2027 period. That will coincide roughly with 2024, which will be a period where we'll be setting the final rate period budgets for the action plan. So this will be a great time for us to take stock, see how these changes are percolating in the market, are some of the things that we predicted would happen happening, and will allow us the ability to, again, adaptively manage and course correct. I'll just remind you of the budgets that we were working with. Again, these were set by IPR, the Integrated Program Review Budget Setting Process. It operates on a 2-year cycle, and I'm showing you the first 2 rate periods here, 212 and about $213 million. The third rate period is absent because it's not been set yet. So that'll come through the IPR 2024 process. You can see we have conservation infrastructure, market transformation via NIA efforts, and conservation purchases. This is kind of the world most of you live in. This includes self-funded and energy efficiency incentive-funded savings. Okay, on to forecasted savings. So our total forecast, which is a little bit different than our goal, is 354 average megawatts across the 2022 through 2027 period. So of course, the vast majority of that comes from BPA programs, 278, and this includes some unallocated savings, which means these are savings above what we forecasted. So we know they're going to come through we know when they're going to come through programs. We're not exactly sure where they're going to manifest, which sector, but we think they'll get kind of used up with the available EEI. We have NIA market transformation, which is both NIA's initiatives and codes and standards savings. And we have our own BPA momentum savings at 30 average megawatts. Oh, and I'll just point out here, too, that BPA programs assumes 30% utility self-funded. So that's that self-funded portion, and then we have the 70% EEI funded for a total of 100. Cool how math works. And so that is an assumption, right? During the pandemic, we saw that self-funding kind of went down, but we're using a historically informed approach of what we've seen before the pandemic, some lingering effects of the pandemic, and what we think will happen after the pandemic. What will resume after, not after, but as we kind of crawl out of some of these ongoing lingering effects. So that's an assumption. It's not going to be perfect, but that is what we included. I'll just remind you here too that our council range is, the range selected by the power plan was 270 to 340. So you can see we are anticipating meeting that with a portfolio that is largely cost effective. So those were the numbers, and I just want to highlight again, this is above our target, but we wanted to leave some room for corrective action. You can see that the majority of these savings are program savings with some critical contributions from market transformation and momentum. I will now transfer it to Eric Mollendor, who's the program lead. You probably know him a lot better than you know me, and he's going to talk you through some of the sectors.
Thank you so much, Elena. On to the first slide. Okay, so I will be covering each of the sectors at a high level. Obviously, just given the length of today's presentation, we won't have time to dive into all of the details, but wanted to give you a sense of some of the strategies that we're using to support those forecasts, the top line numbers that Elena presented. So on the residential side, we are realigning the portfolio to focus on measures that were selected by the BPA's resource program primarily. And those are heavily weighted towards heating and cooling loads, as well as high efficiency water heating measures. So those are the heat pump hot water heaters primarily. The HVAC side on the heating and cooling is going through a pretty significant transformation at this moment. Many of you who are involved in residential EE are aware that BPA recently announced the retirement of PTCS, which has been a kind of a core part of our work within residential HVAC for some time. And that was a hard choice. There were a lot of factors at play there, but overwhelmingly the measures just did not appear to be cost effective anymore, and had largely gained market acceptance, right? So really a success at the end of the day for 20 years of delivering that program. So we are reconfiguring the portfolio though to focus on more advanced technologies such as variable speed heat pumps, and also cold climate heat pumps, a different way to categorize the efficiency of some of these units. And we're also exploring ways to improve our low-income program offerings and promote weatherization through low-income and standard. And so that will involve looking at programmatic barriers primarily on low income and seeing where we can streamline administrative processes and coordinate more closely with our utilities to adopt low income programs within their service territories if they haven't already. And then last thing, it's not noted here in the slide, but on the low cost measure side for residential, we're looking closely at home energy reports. It's an offering that BPA already has, but we currently require a paper form be sent to every home, which is a little bit more expensive, and we're exploring the opportunity to introduce a digital report to reach more end users with those that sort of feedback. On the commercial side, focus is really on adding new measures in some priority end use areas such as HVAC, refrigeration, and energy management. I think particularly on the HVAC side, we see the opportunity for some real growth in things like heat recovery ventilation, which aligns with some work that NIA is doing in that space as well. Refrigeration is an area where BPA used to have a rather large footprint via its Energy Smart Grocer program, and with some new measures that the RTF has adopted, we're hoping to kind of grow that area again as a source of savings, as we see some lingering opportunity from previous efforts. And then lastly, energy management. That's an offering we've had on the industrial side for some time. And we've had some noted success there, not only in achieving savings directly through the behavioral and operational measures achieved through energy management. It's also a great pipeline, or it's a great way to build pipeline for our UES and custom projects as well. We are looking at making some targeted incentive increases, and I should have noted this comment applies to both residential and commercial. So on the residential side, a number of existing measures are getting incentive boosts as we transition away from the PTCS offerings. And on the commercial side, this includes measures such as luminaire level lighting controls, air source heat pumps, and some controls, some HVAC controls measures as well. And then we are also beginning to explore the midstream delivery mechanism for non-residential lighting, primarily in the commercial sector. So BPA is not launching a midstream infrastructure program, but we are adding midstream measures to our UES portfolio and working with utilities who have decided to launch their own midstream programs to report those savings to BPA in the future. Next slide, please. Taking a look at the total savings from each of the sectors and sort of how they get broken out, starting with residential, we've got 53 average megawatt total over the 6-year EE action plan timeframe, heavily weighted towards HVAC, and that has, historically been true at least since the decline in lighting opportunities in this sector. The whole building meter level, that largely represents the home energy reports that I was referring to, and then water heating representing primarily heat pump hot water heaters in homes, but also an emerging area of interest in heat pump hot water heating kind of built up systems for multifamily environments. Slide, please. The commercial sector represents the largest overall savings forecasted over the action planning period at just over 100 average megawatts. The largest portion of this by far comes from non-residential lighting. That has historically been true, and we expect that to continue. Sorry, I've got an upset dog in the background, so if you're hearing a little whining, I apologize. But that lighting represents just under half of the total savings we expect to report over the EE action planning period. The next in line comes custom, and that includes both custom opportunities delivered by BPA's customer service engineers, as well as much of the work that are option 2 utilities. So those are the our larger utilities that independently operate a lot of their programs. That custom, that second custom bar there represents almost all of what they report to BPA. So that does include some lighting, I'll note as well. And then third up, prescriptive HVAC, SEM, which is strategic energy management, and prescriptive refrigeration are some offerings that we expect to see some growth in as we add new measures. So you can see in all three of those latter categories, pretty significant growth over the course of the E-Action Plan as BPA adds measures and infrastructure program support to those areas. Next slide, please. On the industrial front, you know, this is always a hard sector to forecast in that so much of the savings come through custom project analyses. And we really continue to expect those custom projects to represent the large majority of savings reported through the industrial sector, with lighting projects and strategic energy management making up the remainder of the savings. Very little UES delivery within the industrial sector. We are looking at making some targeted incentive increases and simplifying our custom project incentives. Right now, I think we have about 18 different categories where you would get a different incentive level, and I think we're aiming to reduce that to around 7 in the next rate period. On the agricultural side, continuing to invest in demonstration projects to promote some emerging technologies around zonal variable rate irrigation conversions, which is really about only applying water to those parts of a field that would really benefit from water, and advanced water management irrigation scheduling, which is really about only applying water to a field at all when there's a demand need within that field. We're also looking at expanding the use of agricultural energy audits and leveraging some state programs that we've seen emerge, particularly in Oregon, to help ease the burden on producers on identifying potential upgrade opportunities within this sector. We'll take a look at the next slide. Looking at industrial a little bit closer, as I said, well, first, you know, top line numbers, just under 80 average megawatts. So this is our second largest sector by savings. The vast majority, I think around 65, 70% coming from custom projects with lighting and SEM neck and neck for that second largest contributor. We do continue to see significant lighting opportunities within this sector, and are really excited to see more projects adopting advanced lighting controls. So we think this that the economics are really good with the types of facilities, industrial facilities, also often running very long hours. And then SEM, as I said, it not only generates significant savings itself, it is participants in our strategic energy management offerings represent an outsized portion of the custom projects that are later developed. Thank you for the note, Elena. I use the term UES, and that is unit energy savings, or our prescriptive offerings. The agricultural sector is one of our smaller ones from total reported savings, but it is an important one, especially for those service territories where it represents a significant portion of the load. So at just 8 average megawatts over the course of the 6-year time frame. The bulk of those savings occur within the irrigation end use with motors and drives. Again, a lot of those motors and drives directly related to delivering water where it's needed. Lighting and utility distribution system round out end uses where we see and forecast significant opportunity within the agricultural sector over the 6-year time frame. Next slide. Looking at our last two sectors, The first one I'll cover is the federal sector. And I want to note here that we're really only talking about federal direct serve. So our irrigation districts and some of BPA-owned transmission lines and that sort of thing. And here we're looking to really understand to a greater degree what the actual market potential from these customers are. And we've seen some growth in the uptake of our federal offerings, which is excellent, but kind of understanding what might be out there over the 6-year time frame with a greater degree of certainty is something that we're prioritizing at this point in time. And then utility distribution. This is a sector that has again been around at BPA for a little while, but we do continue to see maybe underutilization of this offering. So, and we think this has a lot to do with just finding the right contacts at utilities to engage in the conversation around primarily the conservation voltage reduction, or CVR measure. We take a look at those numbers a little bit closer. Again, the federal program, given that most of this load that we're referring to as federal here are irrigation districts. That process column row is really the pumping for the irrigation districts, with a little bit of lighting and adding to the total savings of about 16 average megawatts over the 6-year time frame. And next slide, utility distribution, just forecasting about 1.5 average megawatts over the 6-year time frame. Again, most of this is CVR, conservation voltage reduction, though there's also some transformer upgrades included in there as well. And I think that is it for my section. If I could hand it back to you, Elena.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate it. Okay, so that wraps up our discussion of the sectors, their savings and their strategies, and definitely let us know in the chat if there are questions, or you can save your questions for afterwards. We'd be happy to discuss those. I know it was a little bit high level. Okay, so switching gears now, we're going to talk a little bit about demand response. So this is exciting. Demand response was selected in the resource program and the power plan at about the same quantity, 300 megawatts of DR by the end of our BPA fiscal year 2026. So that's around end of September of 2026. And this is notable because the products that were selected here were low-cost, frequently deployable technologies that provide energy benefits, energy resource, not capacity, which is traditionally the way we think about demand response. So namely, these are demand voltage reduction, a cousin of conservation voltage reduction, kind of looking at the peak times, and time-based pricing products like time of use rates or critical peak pricing. So that's a little bit of a difference in kind of the application of DRs using the same technologies, but for a slightly different purpose. And we've gotten a lot of interest around this from the utilities, and so we're quite excited to be exploring this. We don't commit to a goal for DR in the action plan because it is something that we're going to have to work really hard on with our utility customers internally to kind of figure out what the implementation plan will look like. But that's what the focus is going to be over the action plan period. It's really kind of getting that implementation plan on the ground and helping determine kind of what comes next and what the implementation can really look like. This is not new for BPA, but it is new to kind of do it at such a large scale. So definitely welcome any questions on demand response in just a few minutes here. Okay, so that's all that I will say about the sectors, the different kind of areas of focus for us, what we're planning on doing, in a more specific way over the action plan period. Now I'll just talk to you a little bit about the management of these strategies going forward. So a forecast is only as good, like basically right away becomes something of the past, and we're well aware of that. We're going to continue to refine this portfolio going forward. We know that we've had to do a lot of kind of divination, looking into the crystal ball, and now starts the real work. We'll be evaluating portfolio offerings and delivery channels to see what needs additional tweaks, what needs more help, what needs less help, what is the uptake among our customers and your end users. We're going to continue to focus on customer needs through conversations, through the utility sounding board, through the November roundtables that we do. So, please continue talking to us and telling us what's important to you and how it's landing. And as I mentioned, we have to really see what the impacts of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law will look like. These are massive amounts of money and massive impacts on the energy efficiency and just energy landscape that really need to be kind of much better understood. So we're keeping tabs on that. And I want to thank Council for some of their awesome presentations recently on these topics. It's really helped me to understand where things are going and what we can look out for. So that's awesome. And as I mentioned, we'll be doing a midterm progress update midway through the cycle. That'll be around 2024. That'll line up nicely with when we are setting the third rate period budgets for 25. For the last rate period of the action plan. So that'll be really important, and that'll give us a chance to really take stock of where things have gone and what additional changes need to be made. Okay, last slide before questions. So some key dates. As I mentioned, we posted the action plan for public comment. It'll be available for 2 weeks until March 7th, end of day. So please, it's on the website, it's on energy efficiency. There's a subsection for the action plan, BPA energy efficiency, and I can type that into the chat later. And we've had this webinar today. I've been looking forward to this webinar for so long. I keep putting it in the future tense. So this is kind of your chance to hear a little bit more about the plan prior to maybe diving in and doing your own comments. And please, you can send those to me or your account executive or whoever you trust the most and feel the most comfortable talking with. And then throughout March, we'll be looking at those comments, reviewing, responding, and importing them into the action plan where we deem it appropriate. And then we're aiming to get the final action plan published by the end of April. I hope that timeline sticks. I'm pretty committed to it myself, and so bar any other disruptions, that's what we're sticking to. And let's see, what else? You can contact me with any other questions about the action plan if you don't have something specifically related to comments or this presentation. I'm definitely your point of contact for the action plan. I'm supported by Bonnie Watson, who's the acting manager of the planning and evaluation team. And of course, a lot of you know Dave Moody, who's acting deputy VP of EE, but also has been highly involved in the action plan. So those are a few more names that you may feel comfortable reaching out to.